Hi. So today I'm going to play Santeria by Sublime. I think it's a really good song to talk about energetic boundaries and protection. I'm also convinced that artists that are passed on determine when you get to play their songs. I said that with the Avicii episode. I kind of feel like it with this episode too. I wasn't really ever into ska, but for whatever reason, I kind of liked their vibe. I liked Bradley Noel, and unfortunately, he passed away, I believe, of a drug overdose in the mid 90s. And now Sublime still exists, but I'm going to throw it old school Sublime today, and we're going to sing Santeria. This is one of those songs, though. Don't pay attention to the lyrics because some Sublime lyrics have not aged very well. Um, but again, it's kind of the spirituality portion of it that we're going to talk about today. So it looks a little bit harder than I think that it's going to be. There is 6 chords in this one. I did do a couple dry run throughs. It is pretty easy. I'm doing a simplified version though, so there are some chords that I'm not sure how they're going to sound in the grand scheme of things. Also, I'm going to be playing it in stereo piano. I don't know if that's the right call either, again, because Sublime is a little bit more ska. We're just going to give it a go and try it with a stereo piano. If it doesn't sound right with a stereo piano, then I'm going to try it with a grand piano. But we're just going to see how it goes, and as always, come along for the ride. Maybe it's because the song was such a staple in my high school stoner era that I thought it was mostly incoherent babble that sounded really fun and was in a register I could sing in. It wasn't actually until a couple years ago, when I was already into my spiritual journey, that I found out it was actually a religion. Like the song says, though, I don't practice Santeria, I ain't got no crystal ball. These are both true. That doesn't mean I can't respect it, though, as there are some correlating elements to some of my own beliefs. And like I can respect that other people believe it's just that I personally. Oh, that part is hard. Find it to be a little off balance from where I try to be spiritually, but again. Oh, that is so quick. Restart that. I understand the appeal and some of the concepts, and I don't judge other people for believing in that. As far as crystal balls go, though, scrying is a great way to rack up karmic debt if you're trying to look into anything other than for your path or what you have permission to do from the energy that you're trying to scry on or for. Doesn't really matter the method, could be mirrors or fire too. It's an invasion of spiritual boundaries if it's not known or welcome. Even worse if it's done with ill intent. That's why it's important to focus on your path and your journey. I was closer that time. Hold on, I'm just going to practice that part first. To that point, also, that applies to other things such as tarot. Tarot gets a bad rap, but I personally think that's because it's often not used properly. It's the first 2 lines of the chorus are okay. It's the second 2 that I'm struggling with. It's not really supposed to be about looking into the future, and I personally use it more for reflection. And you have to interpret it from an honest place too, or it's not going to be accurate. What is meant to happen will happen regardless. Like everything in the spiritual world, it's all about intent and duality, but is open to personal interpretation based on every individual's beliefs and where they're at in their own spiritual journeys. And not everything should be taken quite literally. For example, the Devil card in a standard tarot deck doesn't necessarily represent an incarnate version of a being. It more represents our own inner demons, our vices, hedonistic desires, temptations, and shadow sides. My soul Okay, well, that's hard. Um, that moves really quickly, especially in the chorus, but I think a lot of it is just a matter of learning the chords. Right now, I'm still trying to learn the positions of the chords within the song while trying to read it. So I think that just getting more comfortable with the flow of the chords will help out with speed a bit, but that's what practice is for, so we're just going to give it another go. I know that a lot of the spiritual stuff can sound a little out there, especially if you're used to something a little bit more traditional. But spiritual attack is real and it can show up in many forms. It's easy to say that it's a fantasy, but that doesn't mean everything is a spiritual attack either. And I think sometimes it's easy to miss because many of us have different versions of what the spiritual world looks like, and different religions have different levels of presence when it comes to energetic entities. Now feel the break, feel the break, feel the break, and I gotta live it up. Oh yeah, well I swear that even though the concept still applies, it can look different across the board. Because a lot of what I believe has been rooted in some level of Christianity, but has become an amalgamation of beliefs. I will preface the rest of this with some clarity on what the spiritual hierarchy looks like to me, and I'll reiterate that these are my personal interpretations. Believe what you want to believe as long as you're not hurting anybody. I don't care. That is your journey and your personal path to God, or whatever you believe, and it only needs to make sense to you. So, my tier one is God, divine source, the universe. I kind of use these three terms interchangeably, though I could understand how that would be confusing. The ultimate universal energy that we connect into and that we are smaller parts and representations of. But if you look at God from an energetic flow perspective, that explains free will and minimal intervention, cause and effect, balance, that sort of thing. Two is Jesus and the Ten Commandments. I was raised Catholic. Jesus was the guy, the embodiment of light, and treat others the way you want to be treated, doesn't matter who they are. He was also known to flip a few tables, but ultimately died for our sins and is our salvation. Although the commandments are an Old Testament thing, they're essentially the most basic guidelines to being a good person and living a life in God's image. However, I think it's important to look at them from a more modern worldview, and I don't know if we do enough of that. So some interpretations seem a little bit outdated for the time. Again, purely personal opinions. Number three is saints, gods, and orishas. Hear me out. I'm convinced that most of us actually have the same concepts of a lot of things. We just argue about what they're called and some of the finer details. Think of it this way. Miracles are a requirement to be canonized as a saint, and they're all patrons of something. When you get confirmed in Catholicism, you choose a saint to identify with. When you really zoom out on it, it doesn't sound that much different than deities from other cultures or religions. Like the Greeks, we frame it as powers, but ultimately it was just widely believed that they had the abilities or could provide protection in varying areas. And I'm not saying that they didn't have powers. Like, there are definite divine connections there. You can't argue that. A lot of the deities from various cultures have common patronages, but slightly different elements which appear to be based more on environment than anything. Like, for example, places, certain things specific to those places. That is the protector of that place and may not be as appreciated outside of that because there is a specific need in that place for it. With that said, I do think we often limit ourselves in some cases from deities that may resonate with us and our own personal soul's journeys because of perceived cultural boundaries. But for my spiritual journey specifically, it's more of an amalgamation rather than a cultural focus because it's more about energy and purpose. Number four is angels and demons because duality. They're the messengers and protectors, or the distractions and the destruction. And then number 5 is prophets. And I think it's really funny that when we think about prophets, we think about prophets from thousands of years ago, like there hasn't been any since then. I just think we discount a lot of the ones that there are, like Tupac or Ye. And don't even come at me for that, because I've said for a long time that he's just way ahead of his time and we don't necessarily understand what he's saying at the time he's saying it. Also, give the guy some grace for the highest ticket conservatorship that never happened. Oh, no, sorry, there is one other. As with all things in the universe and spiritual world, there is a duality and a balance. So there can be good and bad on both sides, and that's why it's important to use your discernment and try to reach a place of spiritual alignment that feels right for you. You never know when it may come in handy. I mean, hey, even Taylor's talking about spiritual attacks, so you know it's got to be serious. We are all energy, and we attract energy attuned to our vibration or around our vibrational level. Well, that's not entirely true. Light attracts demons often, but the light doesn't require the same level of validation and admiration in being seen. Even if you don't necessarily participate in certain spiritual practices, there are some people who are, which includes some people who have no idea what they're summoning and others who abuse what they have to mistreat or take from others. Spiritual self-defense doesn't count because it's not intended for that purpose. It's only intended for the purpose of protection. And if done properly, will only impact the original attacker. That's not to say it's everyone, like it's just there's bad apples in every batch. But if you don't know or don't take it seriously, you're much more susceptible to that kind of attack. That's why spiritual and energetic protection is important. Well, I swear that we often think of threats in the 3D perspective, but with everything as energy, it extends beyond that. Not all are detectable on this astral plane. I've seen people out here throwing curses like it ain't no thing, but it is. It's definitely a thing. Don't do it. It may not always look how we expect it to, but the stronger your spiritual protection, the better the ability to both detect and withstand. That energy is out there, and if you're not properly equipped to deal with it, it can fester into something darker and more self-consuming. That's also the thing about spiritual and energetic protection. A lot of it is how you tap into those astral energies. That can look different, depends on what you're open and able to perceive. Could be God, deities, ancestors, fallen loved ones, etc., that are on the same frequency, energetically speaking. Like when you hear about purgatory or ghosts and how they have unfinished business and that's why they linger around. Well, could it be possible they're looking to align with energies that align with their own values, missions, and goals that can maybe help them fulfill that purpose? Again, like everything, this can be both positive and negative. It depends what you attune to. And all energies have that. We as people have that duality in us. So it's what qualities in them speak to what qualities in us. For example, I like to say my great uncle is my art director from the other side. My soul will have to wait till I get back, find a hana of my own. He was passionate about that sort of thing when he was alive, but it's not something that we ever got to enjoy together. But that we definitely would have bonded over if we had. Again, it sounds cool, but there is good and bad to it. Like I said in a previous episode, there's a spectrum of how it can look. If you're vibing low with ill intent, repeatedly trying to attack someone with good intent and spiritual protection, not being aware of your target's Akashic records, which you really shouldn't be peering into without permission anyway, but really ultimately comes down to intention, or by misleading the energies that you're working with, there will likely be some sort of backfire, but severity depends. And those kinds of backfires or misleading those energies can damage your own connection with them and lose your ancestral and spiritual support. These connections, like regular earthly relationships, need to be maintained. And it doesn't always look like sacrifice. And I think people really get hung up on that. It depends on varying beliefs and customs. Not my thing, but I only work with light energy. Oh, pretty good, except for that last part at the end. If everything has a nefarious intention, you're already doing it wrong. There are different ways of interpreting everything, and again, it depends on a lot of factors. And when I use the term deities, know that I'm generally referring to anything that's in my tier 3 or 4 in my spiritual hierarchy. And what I have found to be true for many deities is they all have positive and negative traits. It's often a matter of which version the emphasis is put on. I think Shiva is a good example of this, known as the destroyer. It almost has a negative connotation to it, even though there is a great level of reverence there. But my understanding of it is it's more about balance and path clearing than destruction and chaos. Transformation, at least to my understanding. The impression that I get with most deities is that though there is capability to do things like exact vengeance, in most cases they would prefer not to, and it's often forgotten that many of them have free will as well, and when given a choice, they are able to choose whether or not it aligns with the purpose they were summoned for or not. And then consequences are based on what they choose to do. That's why anything you summon should be done with good intentions, if done at all. But there's also usually some sort of redeeming quality or heroic action for their patronage. If you're going to dabble at all, at least tread carefully, because they can end up more in control of you than you are yourself, or them because they're often more real than we give them credit for. At least go watch the whole Dark Willow character arc in Buffy the Vampire Slayer. A lot of people clearly haven't met possessed Willow, and it shows. But that also doesn't mean that they won't take an opportunity to fuck with people if they're summoned to do so, or if they feel like they've been misled by the original sender. On that note, if the energy gets there and realizes the target is more aligned with their true intentions than the original sender, that can lead to loss of spiritual backing for the original practitioner or sender to begin with. As a byproduct of that, it can also result in support for the original target. Another thing to consider here is that spiritual rank isn't a visible class system in the 3D. You don't know who is being protected by which energies. In most cases, most people don't know which energies are protecting them. At least not us common folk. Most of us can't even tell at a glance what cultures each other are. Because it's not even about the culture. Again, it's about where energetically you're vibing and what in the universe you're attracting to you. It's best to just not try to mess with people spiritually. Again, that's also where return to senders are super helpful because they're defensive offense. You have an additional level of protection while also not incurring additional karmic debt. Whatever doesn't breach your energetic barrier will be returned to the sender. The strength of that return depends on how strong the boundary is, how strong the sending practitioner is, intensity of intent and force of attack, etc. Return to senders are essentially a repurposed law of karma. That's why I gravitate towards the concept of Ma'at and the feather. I'm still trying to figure out how I've been labeled so extreme, especially since this is my belief. The literal running theme to everything in my life is about duality. It's just a matter of what you attune to, again, another running theme. But if you can get to a place where you're able to balance more of your dark and light qualities, you've got a more solid spiritual foundation. Being close to God doesn't mean never be mad about anything, but you can still be mad and act in love as well. And I think that that's something that we need to learn how to balance a little bit better overall as well, but a lot of that comes with open dialogue. It's definite work to achieve and maintain balance in most capacities. Of all the reasons, spiritual protection, love, and trying to focus on the positive aspects of energy can be important, few are more so than the enhanced ability to disarm spiritual attacks. Even though deities can be summoned for tasks, they have free will and can ultimately decide what they are willing to participate in. I can honestly say from experience, I would not be here if I hadn't been shown divine mercy on a number of occasions. I truly attribute that to my commitment to alignment, balance, and my soul's purpose. On the flip side of that, though, lost, confused souls, not aligned to their highest vibration, devolving into despair, is a high risk of consumption for volatile and negative energy. Dark attracts dark. One of my tinfoil handkerchief theories is that in the current age, the majority of energetic or deity support is called upon with ill intention. I do think a lot of that has to do with a lot of people still not believing that this stuff is real and not taking it serious enough without practicing some level of energetic maintenance. But even experienced practitioners can lose the energetic support. I'm going to use the Orishas as an example because I would say they are more widely understood across various religions and cultures. Please note that half the time when I double check information, it changes. But my understanding is the Orishas appear in some African, Cuban, Brazilian, Haitian derived religions, such as Santeria and Yoruba. Of the Orishas, Oshun is the standout and the favorite of Oludumare. I'm sorry, I don't think I said that right, but I apologize. She's also a trickster with a bit of a jealous streak, can make people cut off their ears. Because of this, I think it's worth considering that maybe her energy has been misused for ill intent a bit. Has anyone considered how she feels? And I'm not trying to be disrespectful to the cultures in any way. It also does say that Oshun has equivalents in other cultures such as Aphrodite, Freya, Venus, and it doesn't list it, but based on what she's the patron of, it also sounds like she could have correlations to Wajet from Egyptian culture as well. I also don't know if I said that right, but I'm really trying. And also, if we're being honest, I mean, if people stopped sending her to me, then we wouldn't have gotten so well acquainted. So why are keeping your energies aligned and spiritual protection so important? Because like most, there are two sides to her story. While she can be jealous and shady, why don't we talk about how she became the favorite to begin with? Now, it didn't sound as much like this on the recheck, but my understanding of it was there was basically a mutiny where she was cast out by the other Orishas. At very least, she was not listened to as she tried to offer ideas and guidance for their constituents that were not taken into consideration, and then things weren't going well from there. The situation led to some dire straits, but she turned herself into a peacock and used all of her energy to fly to Oludumare, and by the time she got there, she was a vulture, depleted by the journey. She risked her looks, her body, and her life just to help others. Not only that, it was others who treated her like shit. And again, this is just my understanding that she pled for the land to be restored and mercy for the other Orishas and their constituents, even if it was at her own expense. Oludumare was so impressed with her self-sacrifice, her compassion, intentions, and commitment to making things better for all, even though she herself had reason to be upset, she still acted with love. So he appointed her as his divine messenger, and he would communicate through her, and that's what made her special in comparison to the other Orishas, because he saw her self-sacrifice. Now, in modern day, a spiritual attack in the essence of Oshun may look like the feeling of music not being loud enough. Like cranking it to 15 for prolonged periods of time so that your ears hurt, but still just can't rock hard enough. When it happens to me, it usually lasts a few days, which can cause a lot of damage. This is why I stress the importance of energetic protection, because although it may not be a literal physical cut, it could manifest itself to be a loss in another form but similar fashion. That's just one example. Things that can definitely be more severe than that, but that can depend on the vibration you're at when it happens. And with Oshun especially, like, I do have to show appreciation because she was not an energy I really paid attention to. But I've been under heavy spiritual attack for a long time, and she seems to be a favorite tool for the purpose of the damage the people sending her towards me are trying to inflict. I do believe that she's shown me mercy on more than one occasion. Whether or not it's an energy that you work with regularly, if they help you out, it's definitely important to let them know that you're grateful and appreciative of it. But again, if you have spiritual protection and if you're under heavy spiritual attack, especially when they repeatedly try to use one deity, it could be the difference maker in a lot. But overall, your chances are better if you're operating out of love. You may be alone on the physical, but that doesn't mean that you don't have spiritual support. And that's pretty cool. My soul left away. Yes! Okay, so I'm really happy with how that turned out. It takes a while to get the hang of it, but once you get the sequence of the chords in order, it obviously you can move a lot quicker. It is very fun to play, especially in the chorus, but I do still get a little bit tripped up on the intro, but in that last one I did actually get it. It was a little bit off time, but I did get it. So pretty happy about that. But another good song to learn how to play. I don't know if I would say it's like the easiest song to play, but maybe more of like a novice kind of thing. But definitely worth checking out. And thanks for joining me today and kicking it old school. And until next time, keep the peace and keep rocking on.